Today we're going to talk about the 5-number summary and box plots. So now that you know a little bit about variability, now we could talk about the 5-number summary. And the box plot is going to be a way of just visualizing that 5-number summary just really quickly. And then we're going to talk about how to determine outliers, and we're going to be using conditional formatting in Excel. And finally, we're just going to talk about modified box plots, which are going to be box plots where we exclude the outliers already. All right, so there's really 2 ways to summarize a distribution. We've been talking about one way so far, where we talk about shape, center, and spread. And usually when we talk about shape, center, and spread, we often use as a measure of center mean, right? So mean is what we really sometimes mean by center. It could be median, but a lot of times people use mean. And when we use spread, we often mean standard deviation rather than other pairs such as median and interquartile range, right? That's sort of where the 5-number summary comes in. The 5-number summary is a way of using the median and the interquartile range more as our measure of exactly, as a summary of how our distribution looks. And so the 5 numbers are numbers you already know. The minimum value, the Q1, the border of the first quartile, the median, which is actually Q2, right? The median is also Q2 in that it divides the entire distribution in half, so 2 quartiles on one side, 2 quartiles on the other side. Also Q3, the third border, and then the maximum value, the highest value in your distribution. This 5-number summary is often used with skewed distributions. So let me just show you visually what this looks like. So let's say we have a whole bunch of just different data points. And here's our maximum value. I'll just put in a few more. So even. All right. So here's our distribution so far. Now, the 5-number summary would basically say the minimum value is important, the maximum value is important, whatever the value in the middle is, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, so about 6 or 7. So let's say something like that, the median, right? And then Q1 and Q3, which would be dividing sort of this by half, right? So around there. And also dividing this by half, which would be right there, right? So here's min, Q1, Q2, also the median, Q3, and also maximum, right? And so in that way, we get a 5-number summary. We may not know all the little dots in our distribution, but we have a very general idea of it. So now we're going to talk about a way to just visualize that 5-number summary just really quickly. It's going to be called a box plot. It's also called a box and whiskers plot. It's called box and whiskers because oftentimes there's a box, right? It could also be on its side, like this, with whiskers on it, right? And oftentimes this box is split up somewhere in between, not necessarily just in the middle, but just somewhere like that, right? This box is often aligned with an axis of values of your variable, right? And then your Q1 is on the low end, right? So Q1 is on the low end. Q3 is on the high end. Those are the sort of boundaries of that box. The line in the middle is the median. And the whiskers end at the minimum value and the maximum value. Okay? So that's how you decipher a box plot. Now, it could also be on its side like this, right? And in this case, the values would go like this. And once again, you would have Q1, Q3, the median, the minimum, and the maximum, right? And so it sort of doesn't matter whether it's on this axis or this axis, but what you do have to know is the box should be in alignment with the values, right? All right, so let's do an example box plot here just by hand, right? Here's an example set. We can easily see what the minimum and the maximum is, so we already know that. Let's find out what the median is. So the median should be right here, so that should be 30, right? Because what I'm going to do is add 28 and 32 and divide by 2. Just find the average of those two numbers, and that's 30. And visually, I just think of it as what's in the middle of 28 and 32. And then let's find Q1 and Q3. So what's in between here and here? That's 20. Wait. Oh, it should be, actually, I miscounted. Let's see. All right, so we count the 18 as the border, the 30 as the border, so each side gets sort of 2. So the Q1 is right in here, so that should be 22. And here, 30 is the border, 55, so it should be right here. Here's Q3. And that should be about 36.5. Is that right? About 1.5 from there, 1.5 from there. Okay. So there we go. We have our 5 numbers. Now we just need to plot them. I'm going to put it on a horizontal axis, just because I have the room for it. And I know that 18 will be on one side of it and 55 will be on the other side of it. So here I'll put my values. We could pretend this stands for age. Then I would label it age, right? And let's see. Maybe I'll start from 0, right? And sort of divide this up into tens, right? So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Great. So let's start plotting our box and whiskers. What I like to start to do is just put dots there and then draw in the box and whiskers. So here I'd put in a dot where one of my whiskers is going to end. And here's the other end of that. And Q1 is right here about. 30 is right here, the median, and 36.5 is about right here. All right, and so now I know where my boundaries are, I could just draw my box and whiskers. And to help myself, I might just write down where Q1 and Q3 is, because that's going to help me draw my box. And here's my median, right? Here's my minimum whisker. Here's my maximum whisker. So this would be a box and whisker plot or a box plot for this data set that we have right here. Now let's talk about making box plots in Excel. In Excel, it's not a great program for using box plots. If you have Stata or SPSS or other statistics programs, those are probably better options. But for some of you, you may want to make a box plot on Excel. So I'm going to show you 2 ways of doing it. One method is by using stocks. This is a stocks chart, and so it's not originally designed for plotting median, Q1, Q3, min and max. It's actually for stock prices and opening and closing prices, right? But we're sort of going to piggyback on it in order to create our box plots. The trouble with that one is that it does not allow you to show median, right? So this sort of ends up being a 4-number summary. No median. The other option is by using stacked columns. So in this option, you can show the median, but it takes a little more fiddling with it and sort of tricking Excel into showing you something that looks like a box plot. All right, so let's get started. Go ahead and download the Excel file, and you'll see that there's a whole bunch of different sheets that have already put in for you. Some of them, the ones that start with A and S, are already pre-answered, so they already have the graphs and everything in there. But you could also follow along. If you go to height, stock, this is where we're going to plot height on a stock chart. All right. So the nice thing about box plots is that you could have several box plots on one chart, one visualization. So that's what's nice about being able to compare across a couple of 5-number summaries, right? So let's go ahead and find the critical numbers we need for male height and female height. So the thing about stock charts is that they need you to put in their numbers in a particular order. And this is the order you need. You need Q1, the max, the min, and Q3. This order is really hard for me to remember. I always just am like, what? Because it's very arbitrary. But it's because we're sort of piggybacking off of stocks. It's not originally meant for this use. So now let's find the boundary of the quartile, of the first quartile. So in order to do that, Excel has a nice little function for us called quartile. And here's what you have to put into quartile. The input that it receives is the array or your data set, as well as which quartile you would like. In Excel, the first quartile is number 1, right? So you would put in your data, comma, 1. So let's go ahead and do that. Go to data, go all the way up to height. There's male height. I've colored it in blue. Go ahead and select that data. And then I'm going to put in a comma, 1, close parenthesis. And let's look at what we have here. We have this data, comma, 1. Now let's lock that data in place because we don't need that to move anytime soon. I'm going to hit enter. So that's for Q1. In order to find the median, it would be Q2 or median. In order to find the boundary for Q3, it would just be the same thing with a 3. So let's go ahead, copy and paste that function into my Q3 slot. All I have to do is change which quartile that I want it to spit back at me. And so there I have my first and third quartiles. The nice thing about this quartile function is that it could also find you the minimum and maximum values because it considers the minimum value quartile number 0 and it considers the maximum value quartile 4. You could also use the functions min and max, but let's go ahead and use quartile. Makes it easier. I could just copy and paste all of that in there. I'm going to double click on that max one and put in a 4. And I'm going to double click on the min quartile and put in 0. There we go. We now have quartile 1, the max, the min, and quartile 3. Now, let's find the female quartile 1. So quartile, and let's go ahead and find our data, which has now been colored in pink. I'm going to put in a comma, the number 1, and close my parenthesis. Let's see what we have here. If you double click on it, we have our data and quartile 1. And I'm just going to lock that data in place so I could easily copy and paste that all the way down. So I'm going to copy and paste it all the way down. Let's change it for our max value. For our max value, we need quartile number 4. For our min value, we need quartile number 0. And for quartile 3, we need quartile 3. All right. So Notice that for females, the max is slightly smaller, the min is slightly smaller, so is Q1 and Q3 from its male counterparts. Now let's go ahead and put in our graph, our box and whisker plot. Go ahead and select the male and female part of this data set too, just because when you do that, Excel will interpret it as you want it to be the labels for your box and whisker plots. Go click on Charts, and if you click on Stock, you'll see something that looks sort of like a box and whisker plot, right? Now, you could go ahead and click on it, but some of you may get an error signal that looks something like this. To create this stock chart, arrange the data on your sheet in this order: opening price, high price, low price, closing price. Use dates or stock names as labels. We've actually done this already. It has the opening price, or Q1, high price, max, low price, min, closing price, Q3. Yet, Excel is not recognizing that we've done the right thing. The reason is because Excel is not seeing that we've actually organized our data into columns instead of rows. And so here's one thing you might want to do. It's sort of a fudge. Just go ahead and pick, for instance, column, right? Just pick any old one, right? And you'll see that Excel is treating each row as if it's a data set, right? What we want to tell Excel is stop doing that. Instead, organize it instead this way, right? So that it's grouping them into columns. All right, so I'm going to move this formatting palette out of the way.